Hello everyone, welcome to Pro Tour Gatecrash 2013 from the fabulous city of Montreal. Rich Hagan sitting alongside the Pro Tour historian, Mr. Brian David Marshall. So thrilled to be with you. BDM, where do we start?
We're going to start at a pretty impressive table full of Magic players drafting Gatecrash.
Drafting?
Yeah, drafting. It's a new thing we're doing for this Pro Tour, where instead of the draft rounds being at the end of day one, they're going to be at the beginning of day one, and that means we're going to throw people in. We're going to they're going to see what's going on. It has kind of some interesting implications once we get to standard. The back stretch of the tournament is going to be standard, and people who are coming out of those draft pods at 3-0, presumably some of the best Magic players in the room, are going to have their first standard match against someone on somewhat equal footing to them. So it's going to be kind of an interesting way to kick off their constructed rounds.
Yeah, because constructed, normally, if you play the 5 rounds of constructed first, you kind of expect that maybe in the early rounds, you might face some people who perhaps haven't quite read the metagame right, or perhaps haven't absolutely had a big testing team, or nailed down their 75 as well as they might. But if you start at 3-0, well, presumably these are people who are going to have done their standard homework, so I think that is going to be something to watch out for.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who are new to Pro Tour coverage, welcome along. It's great to have you with us. I can tell you that we have 8 rounds on each of 2 days. 3 rounds of draft, as Brian says, and then 5 rounds of constructed. How do you come back tomorrow? You need to go 4-4 or better. So an even record gets you into day 2.
I would say, which is going to be a great relief to someone who has an 0-3 draft, because one person at every draft pod is going to start their weekend off 0-3.
That's right.
1 in 8 players.
Guaranteed. Yep. They just sit there and they'll get to lunchtime, they won't have won a match. Well, 4-4 lets them come back and try again tomorrow. 3 more rounds of draft, 5 more rounds of constructed. So the way that works is that at the end of 2 days, BDM, give us a sense, what are people going to need to do if they want to come back on Sunday?
Well, they need to be the top 8 players in the standings. Really, they need to have probably lost only 3 matches, maybe 4 matches, 3 matches and a draw, somewhere in there is generally the ballpark that falls in. So you got to do a lot of hard work over 16 rounds.
All right.
You got to win at least 12 or 13 matches.
Yeah, that's somewhere around the area. Once you win 12, you kind of feel you might be in the mix, and once you win 13, you kind of feel you can book your ticket for Sunday. Roundabout there. Now, the draft format, it's Gatecrash. We've just come out of Return to Ravnica. We'll be coming back to Return to Ravnica when we have Dragon's Maze. But right now, it's just triple Gatecrash.
Right. And this is unusual, because normally we'd be going into the second set of a block cycle, and we'd have 100 cards coming into the format, 120 cards, whatever, small set. This is a big set. There are a lot of cards. There are a lot of important cards, and it stands alone. So, you've gotten used to, how to value Azorius, and you've gotten used to how to no more.
Yep.
Now you have to think about Simic. You have to think about Boros. You have to think about Gruul. You have to think about Dimir. And, and of course, you have to think about Orzhov, which has been traditionally, it's been the most successful draft archetype on Magic Online in the short window that this has been available. And that's important to note also, that people have been able to draft this on Magic Online for a week.
That's right. Now, if you want lots of information about drafting, we're going to be back together with a big show for you while the players build their decks after the first draft. But we're only here for a couple of minutes now. The players are getting seated, they're getting into their draft pods. But just give me one thing to watch out for, BDM, in the first 3 rounds of draft. What is the one sort of defining characteristic of Gatecrash draft, do you think?
Well, I think that the most common thing I've heard talking to players is that it's sort of 2 sides of the same coin. Either that Dimir is clearly the worst of the 5 guilds for draft. Right. Or people saying, this is a guild I want to draft. Partially for market pricing, partially for, play style. But Dimir is one of the guilds that people are most divided on. And if someone will often have an opportunity to get very late. I've seen 4th and 5th pick consuming aberrations where you're not getting that like with a guild leader in any other guild, even Fathom Age, which is sadly not as good as some of the other guild leaders.
Okay, so when we watch the draft that's coming right up, might be worth following where those Demir cards are going.
Absolutely.
Where are they ending up? Let's talk a little bit about the 2 pods that we're going to be sort of following through the morning, because they're locked together in Mortal Kombat in the arena, 8 players, 3 rounds. You say someone's going to go 0-3, someone's going to go 3-0. The first pod, we begin with Patrick Chapin.
Yeah, Patrick Chapin. I mean, this is someone who has just recently inducted into the Hall of Fame. Pro Tour Hall of Famer Patrick Chapin, we have to say. One of the great minds, one of the great voices of the game, and someone who loves control decks. Would not be shocked to see him drafting Demir cards.
Okay, second up in this pod, Reed Duke of the United States.
How impressive is Reed Duke?
A lot.
How impressive! I mean, coming off of the Player of the Year, the Players Championship, where he finishes last, and prepares this laundry list of reasons why he finished last. And basically since then has really kind of not done anything but win.
Won a Star City Games
Right.
Invitational.
Grand Prix performances, and just a tremendous player, and someone who is very much his stock is very much going up.
Okay, next up we have Andreas Nordahl. Now he's from Norway. He's just come off the back of a Grand Prix top 8 in London. He was part of the Norwegian national team back at San Francisco 2011. Been testing with the Brits, a couple of others. Vincent Lemoire was in that testing group. They're in a pretty good place. Interested to see how that comes out. And then, you've already said one Hall of Famer.
Right, we have 2 at this table. We have Olivier Rouel. Olivier Rouel, we haven't seen him in a Pro Tour in, it feels like 2 years.
I'm pretty sure that's right, at least. Yeah.
At least 2 years. We're going to be talking this weekend about the all-time money winners list. And he is one of, I think, 9 players on the top 10 all-time money winners who are playing this weekend at this Pro Tour.
Fantastic. Now, someone who won't have earned quite as much money as Olivier Rouel is Galdenis Vidigiris. He was the runner-up to Alexander Hayne, Pro Tour Avicenne Restored. Galdenis Vidigiris is in this stellar pod.
Yeah. Go is a tremendous player, someone who's won a couple of limited Grand Prix, and knows his way around a draft pod.
If there's one player in the world you wouldn't want to sit down with in a draft pod at a Pro Tour, who would it be?
There are a couple, but Ben Stark certainly is right at the top of that list.
Strangely enough, Ben Stark is in the pod we're following, and I can reveal that Ben Stark is the player we're going to follow in the first draft of Pro Tour Gatecrash.
That's only 6 players.
Yeah, so then we go to the Netherlands, and from the Netherlands, well, first of all, we have Lennart Lindemann. He's got 2 lifetime pro points, and he won a PTQ in Eindhoven. Good luck, Lennart. And then we have Don van Ravensvaartje. Probably got that wrong, but hey, serves him right. And he won a PTQ in Melbourne, Australia.
Wow, but he's also from the Netherlands.
From the Netherlands, I believe.
Also
so
from the
maybe
Netherlands.
they're on holiday, or just thought,
And he has 1 or 2 lifetime pro points?
I believe it is 1.
So that means both of these guys are playing in their first Pro Tour.
Yep.
They're playing in their first Pro Tour. They have to draft, and they are sitting down surrounded by Patrick Chapin, Reed Duke, Andreas Nordahl, Olivier Rouel, Ben Stark, and Galdenis Vidigiris.
Crazy. I'm sure there's another decent pod somewhere. How about this one? Shibin, Mario Burgos of Argentina, Paula Vita Dama de Rosa.
Wow.
Fantastic. Tomek Pedrakowski, interesting story there. This is the guy who led overnight a Pro Tour Avicenne Restored 8-0, ended up 12th. He's a gold pro. He won the Magic Online gold qualifier. And his brother Pavel then went and won the Warsaw PTQ. So we've got Polish brothers playing together here. He's in that pod. They're not in the same pod. But then a couple of very big names and a couple of names that you know very well.
Ben Sek, been 10 years since his last Pro Tour top 8, but it was limited at Pro Tour Yokohama. Luis Scott Vargas is sitting down at this table.
Wow. And also one of the least known Japanese big name pros, Ken Yukihiro.
Yeah, I mean,
he's literally the guy who no one ever knows about because he hasn't won a Player of the Year title. He isn't a Pro Tour winner. All he is consistently in the top 30, 40, 50 players in the world year on year on year.
And I talked to my column last night about players who have the most pro points without a Pro Tour top 8. Can you hear? He's got that top 8. He's not on that list. It's a kind of name where you're like, oh, I know that name. No, he's been there. He's done this before. So, certainly a formidable player. And then rounding out that table with Samuel Williams from the U.S.
So, again, a pretty fearsome thing. You could see Paolo Dama de Rosa and Luis Scott Vargas, teammates, of course, on Channel Fireball.
And one of the things you really kind of hope for in this, as a team in this limited start to the day, is that you guys are all going to be split up across different pods.
So
you're going to bring your expertise and your preparation to bear on that table, and all meet up in the constructed rounds undefeated, and that can't happen for Apollo and Luis Scott Vargas.
Maybe they'll just ID in the final of the draft. I don't think so. Okay, great news. The players are ready. So we'll be back after the draft with tons of great stuff to mark your card for Gatecrash Draft. But let's get down for the first time. Here we go to the booth and our one and only Marshall Sutcliffe.
Hey everybody, welcome to the booth. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. This is Zach Hill, and we are going to be covering a pretty sweet draft today. We've got a really stacked pod. It's a little different than normal, Zach. We've got random seedings for the draft. Normally it's based on where you're at on the list.
And that's one of the things about the draft coming first this time, is that it's not based on where you're at in the standings. And yet, nevertheless, we've got ourselves a really stacked pod today.
Yeah, we managed to find one. We just had Rich and BDM go over it, but why don't we go over a couple of highlights here before we actually go down to the draft?
Yeah, for sure.
Patrick Chapin, Hall of Famer. And so, he's going to be probably, I don't know how he drafts this format.
Yeah.
I don't even know what his approach is to it. He's generally considered more of a constructed specialist than he is a limited specialist.
As are a lot of the players in this draft. Now, the thing is, that's very relative, right? It's like, oh, you're a constructed specialist. You've merely played at 20 Pro Tours and drafted, So it's kind of all relative. But the interesting thing to me about this is that Dennis, Reed, and Patrick are all on the same team. They tested together. And I wonder if that's their preferences there are going to affect their choices in this draft.
Now, when I saw the list for what we had, there was one name that jumped out immediately, even though he's like 7th on our little list. It's Ben Stark.
Oh, yeah. Many times you talk to people, and they'll routinely say Ben might be the best limited player in the world. His role on his team is to just master limited formats immediately. He might know the set better than anybody else on the planet right now.
Yep. All right. Looks like the players are ready to begin the draft. Now we're going to be covering the draft portion and then all 3 rounds, Zach and I. So why don't we head down to the feature match area right now to watch a draft. All right, looks like we've had the signal for players to go, and we're going to begin this Gatecrash draft. Now, for those of you that haven't had a chance to draft the format, it is 3 Gatecrash packs, even though it's the middle set of a block.
Right. And that's something that it doesn't normally work that way with the second set that's released. Normally you draft 2 of the first set, 1 of the second, and you draft the second first. This time, though, Gatecrash, a large expansion, exactly the size of Return to Ravnica.
Right.
And we're drafting 3 Gatecrash packs. It was something we deliberately decided to change back in R&D, and something that we're pretty happy with how it's working out so far.
Now, I was out on the floor yesterday during the player registration, and I asked a bunch of the teams how many drafts they got in before this. Because some of these, the Channel Fireball guys have been known to put in 30-plus drafts in the week before. It looks like we have our first pack coming up.
Nah, if you haven't ever drafted at a Pro Tour or a Grand Prix before, it's kind of this weird ritual. You have to lay out your cards and count everything, and you can't just sort of start passing whenever you want to. So that's what's going on right now. The player's counting the cards in the pack, making sure nothing's wrong with the draft.
That's right. And one of the other things to consider at these drafts that is going to be different from your F&M draft or your draft with your friends is that you're not allowed to look at your picks in between until you're done with an entire pack and you get like 30 seconds. Now, right on camera here, we're going to look at Ben Stark.
All right. What's he?
And here he is flipping through. You see a Bane Alley Broker. One of my favorite cards from this set.
Well, and one of the cards that'll put you into Dimir, too. You see Smite as a standout.
Yep, Warmind Infantry. His rare is Immortal Servitude, which isn't a particularly strong rare.
Yeah, not too exciting. You got to be disappointed when you don't just open immediately a bomb. Ben, you see looking at the Smite, looking at the Miming Slime. I think I'd have to take the broker out of this pack, but a lot of people really are not into the Dimir guild. So.
Yeah, Dimir has been labeled as the worst of the 5 guilds, but like you mentioned before, it's relative. What did he take? He took the Smite, yeah. So it looks like Ben's keeping it simple here and taking the removal spell to lead off. It's also, it only costs 1 white mana.
Right.
It's nice to keep cheap spells early in the draft.
Now, even though it's a mono-white card, it's a card that's a lot better in the Orzhov guild as opposed to the Boros guild, because you're just going to be doing a lot more blocking and playing a lot more defense. That said, you're still going to put it in your Boros stack a lot of the time.
That's right. It's just Boros would much rather be proactive. Now, we see a Killing Glare here that Ben has pulled to the front, which, again, goes along the lines of what you were just saying of being an Orzhov.
Right. We also see I think it's Consume Flesh, whatever the Diabolic Edict.
Devour Flesh.
Devour Flesh. And it's something about eating people. Another card that stand out. Of course, a lot worse than Killing Glare.
And speaking of edicts, there is an Angelic Edict in this pack as well, but Killing Glare is better enough to actually go into another color.
Right, and that's exactly what he took. I mean, it's one of the removal spells in the set you can use proactively. It doesn't require you to tap out like Angelic Edict does. And it's what Ben takes. I feel like removal very much at a premium in this format. It's true in general, but because the Boros deck requires you to have 3 creatures in play, because the Gruul deck has the Blood Rush mechanic that you can blow out with an instant speed removal spell, really important to get your kill cards.
All right, let's get it. See if we can get the shot. There it is. All right, and looks like there's a few black cards. There's an Urbis Protector that he's taking a look at.
And really not a whole lot else in the pack.
And that's what he took.
Slams it down.
Yeah. It's a solid card. You get a 1/1 creature on the ground plus a 4/4 Flying Angel token for 6 mana. 5 power and 5 toughness for 6 mana. And including a big chunk of it being flying is pretty nice.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to argue with that. I was actually testing a little bit with Team Star City Games for this event, and we could see Urbis Protectors tabling, actually.
It is 6 mana.
Because it's 6 mana and this is a fast format. All things being said, you can't underestimate a 4/4 flying creature.
That's right. Now, it looks like Ben is looking at the Death Cult Rogue, and I believe that's what he took there. He didn't make it easy for us to see. He kind of had it in the middle, but I'm pretty sure that's what he took. It's essentially unblockable. There are a few times when it can become blocked, but generally speaking, it's a 2/2 unblockable for 3 mana in this format.
Right, and it's also exactly what you want. It's a card very easy to cast Cypher spells onto and everything else.
And did Ben already take his card out of this pack?
I believe he did.
I saw that it was blue.
Well, that's one thing about these packs. I mean, the Dimir signal is wide open.
Yeah.
You're looking, you've got to figure out when you want to switch colors, if you want to switch colors. And I don't know that's what he's doing. But you can't just say, okay, after 2 picks, I'm Orzhov, and assume that that's your draft. You've got to look at what's coming to you.
That's right, and it looks like he's doing that right now. All right, he took a Simic Flux Mage out of that last pack is what we're being told. I just missed it. He took it very quickly. All right, so looking here, there's a Dimir Guildgate that he's got pulled to the front. There's also a Dimir Keyrune and a Last Thoughts. I see a Righteous Charge, and he's going to go for an Adaptive Snapjaw here.
Really?
Yeah. So do you think that he's getting the vibe that Simic is open and he wants to move over into that direction?
Well, that's what it sounds like, certainly with the Flux Mage pick. And, Snapjaw, I mean, not a particularly exciting Simic card, but,
no.
It gets the job done. It's 6/2 for 5. I mean, not a lot to say about the card.
All right, he's looking at his next, and I think he took a Hands of Binding there.
Yeah, he did take a Hands of Binding, and that is a signal that blue is wide open in this draft. Hands of Binding, one of the premier cards in the format for both the Dimir and Simic guilds, particularly in Simic because you just don't have a lot of removal spells. I think that's a sign, Marshall, to move into blue right now. And
I believe he's got another Simic Flux Mage here. This is a pretty late one, and it looks like Ben's a big fan of that card. He's now got 2 of them in his pool. And, it seems like he's committing to blue here, and he hasn't quite figured where he wants to go otherwise.
A lot of tricky things you can do with the Simic Flux Mage. And, also a card that allows you to outplay your opponents.
And something that Ben Stark is quite good at doing.
All right.
He sees there's a Hydro form, but that's not a very good card. It looks like he's going to go with Clinging Anemones.
Clinging Anemones.
Yeah.
A card that you're not going to main deck all the time, but it's pretty good against Gruul especially, and sometimes you just need to play some defense.
Yeah, 1/4 Defender.
That can evolve, so it's pretty good with his Flux Mages. He can use counters. Now that was I think it was the X and a blue tap X creatures.
It was indeed.
now at this point, he's just sort of at the back of the pack.
Yeah, we're now at the back of the pack where
Draft.
things are less relevant here. Gridlock, I believe.
Gridlock is the card.
Yeah, which is a potent tempo play, but it's also only certain decks really want it. All right, so he's winding down the end of the pack, and frankly, we're gonna get to take a look here, but I don't know if he's really committed quite yet to which direction he wants to go.
No, I don't know that he has, and I don't know if he's very excited with his deck right now.
He doesn't look like it, but he kind of never does. If you watch him draft, he's contemplative more than anything.
All right, so I mean, if you're just superficially looking at the pack, it looks like he's clearly in Simic, but a lot of those green cards are just not terribly exciting.
That's right. The only one that's really playable out of that pile is the Adaptive Snapjaw, I think. Now, his blue cards look pretty solid, though.
You got a Death Cult Rogue, 2 Simic Flux Mages. He's got the Snapjaw firmly in his playables pile. A lot of the time, players in this review period will just move the cards that they're sort of intending to draft toward the front.
Yeah, now he's got to feel a little bit like he's hoping some good things happen in this next pack. I mean, he wasted some early picks on black and white cards that it doesn't look like he's going to play.
Yeah, I mean, you can splash that Killing Glare. I think
get a Dimir Guildgate or something.
Exactly. A lot of people don't like splashing cards in this format because, again, it's so fast. But I think that's kind of a pretty conservative way of looking at it. I mean, if you've got to play your good cards,
right?
You know, and there is enough mana fixing to splash this if you'd like. So I don't know whether that's what he wants to do, but his deck's kind of underpowered right now. So.
All right, so we're getting a little bit of info from Rashad, and he says that Lennart Linderman, who's on Ben's left, is actually in Dimir.
Really?
Yeah, so this could be interesting to see how many of the blue cards he takes and then what that's going to leave left over for Ben as we go forward.
Right.
Here.
Or whether this is his opportunity to pick up either the green, blue, gold cards, like, or you know, just take some green cards.
Yeah.
Like, he could really use a Krakenura right now.
Absolutely. A Frilled Oculus is a card that you're a fan of?
I love me a Frilled
Although
Oculus.
you don't play it in Simic.
I was playing all my blue decks and play a couple for us. You know. Normally, Root Wallet costs 3.
You take a look at Ben here. You can see he's deep in thought, and he's probably trying to decide, what do I really want to see here? Like, what's the best case scenario for me?
I just thought he was smiling for the camera.
I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're getting a look at Ben here from Florida. Again, considered by a lot of people to be the best drafter in the world. This is quite a treat to get to watch him draft.
I mean, but it goes to show, too. I mean, his deck right now is not in the greatest shape. I mean, even the best players sometimes, get in confusing situations that are hard to resolve.
That's right.
Let's see how he gets out of it.
All right, so this is going to be a big one for him. Let's see if he can open up a big bomb here. I saw a Foundry Champion.
Glider Crest, or what is the card?
It's called the Cloudfin Raptor.
Cloudfin
and I think he's also got a Shamble Shark in there, maybe?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, Marshall, what do you like if you're in Simic better, Shamble Shark or Raptor?
I like Raptor myself, although I've been getting more and more respect for Shamble Shark as I go. Now, it looks like Ben is going to pass that Boros bomb as it's nowhere near where he's at. He's going to take the Cloudfin Raptor. So, again, it's another blue card. He still is base blue, and then assumingly he's going to be going green, but he still really doesn't have much green.
That's true. We've been talking like he's Simic, but there's really no reason to think that. I mean, he could just stay in blue for as long as possible, play maybe the Killing Glare, maybe pick up some late Dimir cards, although he's probably not, because the guy to his left right now is Dimir.
Right.
But either way you look at it, Raptor, very important card to the archetype. You're going to be a tempo deck, and getting that turn 1 play in a way to start applying pressure early, just very, very important.
That's right. Now he's looking at it. This pack did not look particularly strong for him. Sky Games is basically unplayable. Wow, this pack is not good.
Yeah.
Shatter Arc,
very
Paranoid
bad.
Delusions,
Yeah, really
even if he was
bad.
thinking about going Dimir is bad. There's Unexpected Results, which is also not playable.
Yeah, I mean, Cartel Aristocrat, very solid card, but he started out Orzhov. He might be,
Do you think
looking
he's
at
just
and
going to
rethinking.
do you think he's just going to take the Prism? Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I guess so.
Prophetic Prism seems to be the best card out of that pack, and
that
you see him
actually is
give a little
pretty
head
good.
shake there. Yeah, but it's just not what you want in your second
No, it's not what you want to
pick.
be taking second pack for sure. But it does allow him to splash some, off-color cards. And when your draft is looking like this, you're thinking, okay, I might be having to splash.
Yeah, now I see a Frilled Oculus. There's also one of my favorite cards from this set, Elusive Krasis, and he gets past a frontline medic as well. You pull that to the front, but I think he's going to go with the Krasis. Yeah, he does.
I think that's what you want to go with here.
Krasis is great.
Krasis
the Elusive
really
Krasis.
solid.
There's multiple
There are
Krasises,
many Krasises.
but this one is particularly
the fish
good.
mutant.
Yes.
Right. Well, it allows you to brick wall your opponent's offense. It's going to stop everything the Boros or Gruul decks play in the first 3 turns of the game and turn into an offensive powerhouse as the game progresses along.
That's right. It's very tough to deal with that card with that huge toughness. Once you get the 1 counter on, it's out of homing lightning range, and there's not a lot that hits it after that.
Right, and with the card that he has 2 of right now, 2 in a blue, 1/2, starts piling counters on things. You know what that card's called?
Oh, the Simic Flux Mage.
With the Simic Flux Mage, you can just okay, I'll just start putting counters on my Krasis. All of a sudden, I have a 4/8 unblockable.
That's right. Now he's got a Shamble Shark. This is the 3rd one that he's seen this pack, and it looks like he's finally going to take.
Well, and that's pretty validating to Ben in this position, I think. You've got to say, okay, I switched colors very late under the expectation it was going to pay off in the next pack, and seeing all these really high-quality gold cards, high picks, has got to be saying,
Shamble
okay,
Shark's
I made the right
fantastic.
decision.
Yeah, now I just got another word from our spotter, Rashad Miller, down on the floor, and Reed Duke, who is to the left of the guy to the left of Ben Stark, is also in Dimir. So Ben is definitely not going to be seeing any premium black cards coming through. But he doesn't care. That's not what he wants right now. All right, he's got, a Metropolis Sprite's a good start. And there's another Shamble Shark. So he's got to decide between the 2, and it's an easy choice, right?
Yeah, it is. No, the Metropolis Sprite, very good card. A little bit better in Dimir. Really good when it gets some counters on it, too, because you can just attack for more. But, I mean, Shamble Shark's just exactly what you want to be doing. That card can become a 4/3 pretty easily.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of want as many of them as possible.
You also mentioned that Simic as a guild doesn't get too much premium removal, if any. And Shamble Shark can act as a flash blocker if you just need to do that.
Like sometimes someone will attack with a Guild Mage on the 2nd turn. Yeah. And then you just block it with Shamble Shark.
That's right. Okay, he's picked up another Elusive Krasis. It looks like he knew the signals, and it seems to be paying off here because each of his picks outside of those first 2 are really great for his deck.
No, exactly. And this is why Ben's so good.
Yeah.
He was able to read almost the negative space of what wasn't there and figure out exactly what he needed to do in order to reap the rewards in the 2nd pack. And I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing right now. All right.
Players are looking at their hand, and there's a Way of the Thief, another Clinging Anemones, and there's really nothing for him here. That Hydro form's not playable, and it looks like what he's going to take. It does come up every once in a while.
Sometimes it can be a kill spell, kind of.
Or a block a flyer.
Right, exactly. There's some pretty good 2/2, 3/1 flyers in the set.
That's true.
It has some utility. But
it will start in his sideboard, though.
Yeah, yeah. Or at least we assume it will.
Yeah. All right, he's taking a look, and there's a Forced Adaptation. There's a Void Walk, a Scanclab Charger, which is what he's going to take, I'm assuming. Yeah, and he takes it over the Keymaster Rogue, which I like that pick a lot.
I in general like that pick, although I will have to say I like Keymaster Rogue in an Evolved deck. You've got 2 Shamble Shark, you've got 2 Krasises, so you just play it and keep picking stuff up and evolve your guys very quickly. So.
It's just the problem, of course, becomes that sometimes you have to pick up the guy that that you've put all the Evolve into. All right, Ben's looking at, these are kind of getting towards the dregs here. These are, you hope to pick up something decent for your sideboard here. Some, a Naturalize would come around now, something along those lines. But these are important picks generally, unless you're very lucky.
I mean, I think, right now, you just hate draft the Cartel Aristocrat there. That card has no business being in the pack this late. It does tell you that there's not a lot of Orjab drafters at the table, but what you don't want is for it to get to the 1 or 2 Orjab drafters that are there, and then just get a needlessly late pick.
That's right.
That was
he's gonna pass another Void Walk here.
Draft.
Yeah, Void Walk, very, very tricky card to use.
It is, yeah. You have to have a really strong reason to want that card in your deck. And the type of stuff that Ben has right now is much more straightforward Simic, just playing creatures, evolving, attacking, and he doesn't need to be messing around with cards like that.
Yeah, I guess theoretically you could set up some kind of evolved business.
You could. It ends quickly, right? Like you get 1 trigger or something. It's not worth the card.
Yeah, right. No,
all right, and they wrap up their pack.
Now
Now Ben's going to get a chance to review his picks here. Draft. We see one of our coverage guys, Trick. He's going to reach in and grab the card. That's because they're doing this for the draft viewer. So you're going to get a chance to replay all of the action here. But right now. Hopefully we can get a look at Ben's hand as he goes through. Here it is. And yeah, you know, his first pack was pretty unexciting with a few highlights, and things have really come around for him here.
Well, and his deck's still not super exciting, but he definitely picked up a lot of the Simic cards that you want to have if you're in the Simic deck. The downside is his deck's just not very deep right now.
That's right.
And you know, again, with the 2 Dimir drafters upstream of him, he's kind of not going to be seeing a lot of the blue cards that you need to get your creatures through.
It's funny, right when you said that his deck's not that deep right now, he kind of paused on that Merfolk.
Yeah.
Which is like not a card you'd really be excited to play.
Yeah,
but he's
4/2 for 6.
Yeah, but he's like, well, you know.
It'll evolve your guys.
It will evolve your guys at instant speed. I've seen worse cards for sure, but Merfolk of the Depths, you know, not a premium card in the Simic deck.
I've seen worse cards. I've certainly seen better cards.
Absolutely. You've probably made better cards. All right, players are laying out cards for the 3rd pack here from the draft at Pro Tour Gatecrash. This is a triple Gatecrash draft, and we're watching Ben Stark make his selections. This is great stuff for draft junkies around the world.
I would be excited if Merfolk of the Depths make it. We gave that card a 2nd point of toughness at the very last minute. To
is
just
that right?
Be like, you know, maybe there'll be some times to play this. Yeah, right, exactly. Maybe you'll evolve a Shamble Shark or something. Yeah. I guess you'd do that anyway. But.
I think a lot of people look at it and assume that it has evolved.
Yeah.
And then they're like, wait, this doesn't have evolved.
No. 4/2 for 6.
Yeah.
I think the playtest name of that was like Sudden Weasel Explosion of Doom or something. It was definitely an adorable rodent.
Oh, we see some of the players stretching out here. It is early in Montreal. I guarantee you Ben's not used to drafting it at 9 a.m.
Magic players in general not used to waking up at 9 a.m.
Not this early, but you know, a Pro Tour, that'll get you out of bed.
I remember when I was at the apartment in New York playtesting with Star City, Sam Black like went to bed at like 3 in the afternoon. He just stayed up the entire cycle. Yeah,
he keeps a pretty erratic sleep schedule for sure. All right, looks like players are just about ready to get a look at this 3rd pack. This is going to be really important for Ben. This is going to add depth to the deck that he's building, and hopefully he can open a bomb as well.
Yeah, he needs some help right now.
Yeah, there's another Shamble Shark, another Death Cult Rogue,
another Prophetic Prison.
Another Simic Flux Mage as well. I mean, how many of these things can you play? I guess 3 is
evidently a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's a card that you want the 3rd copy of.
I'm not sure either, although the Shamble Sharks are getting a little redundant as well. Yeah. Now, we see that Ben is passing an Angelic Skirmisher, an outright bomb in white. It's just double white. He has just no chance to even get near that card.
There's just not an easy way for him to play it.
No.
But, I mean, so he's got a lot of 3-drops. I would have thought that you want the Shamble Shark just to make sure you have a turn 2 play. But, I mean, you know, Flux Mage, very powerful. And, again, when you're just as good at combat as Ben is, it gives you an opportunity to outplay your opponents.
Absolutely. It makes combat a complete nightmare. I see a Bio Shift. There's a Grizzly Spectacle, another Adaptive Snapjaw, and these packs just are not being kind as he's shipped another bomb. This one's in Boros with Assemble the Legion, and he's just nowhere near it.
Yeah, I mean, what does he even have in this pack? You don't want tower defense.
He's going to take the Snapjaw or the Totally Lost.
Totally Lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, Totally Lost is pretty important in a deck like this just because you need some way to get through.
Pseudo removal, yeah.
Right, exactly. But, I mean, you just have got to be upset to see all of this... all these high-quality cards that you're just shipping right through you. Now,
he's going to take the Adaptive Snapjaw over the Fibble Thip. He's like, you know, he wants more creatures. He wants to make them big. And, you know, Adaptive Snapjaw is a pretty ideal curve topper in that it will evolve everything you have on the table.
Yeah, and it is good discipline. It's like you've got to have a plan and stick to it.
Now he's got a bomb.
Okay.
Master Biomancer he gets past. That is one of the best possible bombs he could have gotten past here. Now, you can see that he's keeping his calm, cool exterior, but I guarantee inside he's like, yes.
It's kind of a badly needed injection of, of goodness into the deck.
You see he's already picked it. He's like going to thumb through the rest, but that was what we call a windmill slam. Master Biomancer is an amazing card. And you can see a little smirk there. He's like, well, that was nice.
Well, and he's actually able to put even more counters on the Biomancer itself.
Yes.
Meaning that you're used to this card making all your guys, you know, +2/+2, which is insane.
Right.
But it can get even bigger than that in this deck very easily.
He can flux mage stuff around. Let's see what he gets out of this pack. That was certainly great for him.
That was probably the exact card that he most wanted in the entire
I think so
format.
too. Oh, and he gets a Duskmantle Seer. Now this is interesting because we know that the next two players are both in Dimir, and they wouldn't mind having a Duskmantle Seer.
But he just takes it. He can actually play the card off his Prophetic Prism.
Yeah.
The quality is so high. It's a 4/4, so it's going to evolve everything.
That's right.
I feel like you want to play the Killing Glare anyway in this deck, so you might as well just splash 2 really high-quality black cards.
All right, let's see if he can pick up a Dimir Guildgate or something along those lines.
Crypt-Ghast over there? Or no, that's not. Okay.
Nope.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Oh, there is a
All right.
Crypt-Ghast, but
I mean, I don't know that that's
yeah,
what
he
wants.
can't do much with it. Yeah, there's really not much for him here. There's just another adaptive Snapjaw.
His Scatter Arc he's looking at. I feel like you just take the Snapjaw.
Yeah, I think so too. Just keep it simple. Again, when you curve with Simic into a Snapjaw, it is the punctuation mark on all of the evolve that you've built up.
Exactly. I think Ben, though, he just needs more 2-drops right now. I think if,
there's
even
one
the
right
Metropolis
now.
Sprite. Oh, man.
Oh, wow. And he gets a Diluvian Primordial Past, which is, you know, these have been a source of contention. These 7-drops, he might just go for the 2 here. 7s have been pretty tough to resolve. He does, in fact, go for Metropolis Sprite. Now, if you resolve Diluvian Primordial, you can take a look at it on your screen here. It's generally very, very strong.
Yeah, exactly.
But getting to 7's rough.
Well, getting to 7's rough, and Ben's deck has a very, very good late game, you know, and he's got like adaptive Snapjaws to top out his curve a little bit. I mean, obviously Primordial is an even bigger beating, but
he has a Biomass Mutation pass to him now as well, which can end the game all by itself, right?
And the interaction with +1/+1 counters means that you may make all of your creatures into 3/3s, but the counters apply on top of that.
Yeah.
So it can make them into your entire army into like 5/5 creatures. Very,
so this
very
third
powerful.
pack has gone great for him. I've heard Biomass Mutation compared to Overrun in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it's an instant.
We got a Hands of Binding right here. You got to be exactly what you want to see if you're Ben right now.
Hands of Binding. This is actually a very strong pack for how late it is.
Yeah,
There's still
really
a Death Cult
deep
Rogue
pack for him.
The players to his left are going to be really excited to pick up Death Cult Rogues this late.
Of course.
Death Cult Rogue's playable in Ben's deck as well as a blue-blue, you know, unblockable.
A little bit
blue,
challenging on the mana, but if he does end up splashing black, that actually makes it a little easier.
Ben's going to pick up a Prophetic Prism
I think that Prism really valuable. It gives him something to do on the second turn, and it makes the splash of Duskmantle Seer and Killing Glare basically painless at this point.
Yeah, now I think he has 3 Shamble Sharks and 2 Metropolis Sprite right now.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's somewhere in that area, so not too bad for his 2-drops as far as committing stuff to the board. And I have to say, Shamble Shark and Metropolis Sprite work very well together. Yeah. you know, you do get an evolve trigger if you play your Shamble Shark first, which is great.
Now, I feel like I in general want to have between like 5 and 8 2-drops in this format. So it makes me like, oh, 3 Shamble Shark, 2 Metropolis Sprite, he's totally fine. And he probably is. But it's definitely something that it's hard to have too many of.
Now, when you say 2-drop, do you mean creature or do you mean something to do on turn 2? Like
that's a good point. I think ideally you want a creature, but mainly I just think it's so important to be spending your mana every turn.
Okay.
And for the first like 4 or 5 turns of the game. And like, you know, Prophetic Prism, you're sort of spending your mana. I mean, you're not doing a whole lot, but presumably you're getting rewarded for that by having access to higher quality cards.
That's right. And, you know, that's one of the big benefits that I've noticed about the Simic deck is that it has 2 potent playable 1-drops that a lot of decks don't have. You know, it's got Cloudfin Raptor and it has Experiment 1. You know, both at the common, one's a common, one's an uncommon. And that really opens up the door for some super great curve outs from Simic that even Boros doesn't have access to sometimes.
Well, you just have a lot more size, even than Boros can. And when we say 1-drops, 2-drops, of course, we just mean creatures that you can cast on the first, second turn of the game. They cost 1 mana, cost 2 mana. Some magic.
A little jargon, but we like to explain it just to be sure. And looks like players are going to get up, and what they're going to do now is they're going to be doing the deck build. So I have a feeling
I was going to let you
that Ben is pretty happy with how the thing went, with how his draft went in the third pack.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the payoff in the second pack with the early creatures and then obviously 2 Shamble Sharks is exactly what you want.
Do we want him to build here?
Hi. Welcome back to the booth. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe, and this is Zach Hill. What were you saying, Zach?
Oh, yeah, I was just saying I think Ben got, a lot of the power payoff in the third pack, but a lot of sort of consistency payoff in the second pack. And first pack just not really very good for him at all. So it'll be interesting to see whether the later packs were able to balance out the kind of unfortunateness of the first pack.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about draft strategy in general.
Sure.
Because I've gotten a chance to draft with Ben.
Oh, yeah?
And I mean sit with him and draft.
Oh, cool.
And him and I have a similar style in our approach, which is that we'll stay relatively open and kind of take things as they come. Do you feel like in Gatecrash Draft that is the correct way to go? Or do you think, you pick up a gold card early and you go with it?
See, I'm a big fan of staying open in this format, largely because it's a pretty deep format. I find that I don't usually have very much trouble coming up with 23, 22 playables for a deck. I also like playing 18 land in this format because it's
I find myself playing 18 land all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
I did with Orzhov to start, and now I've moved into...
Just with everything.
It's just weird because I'm like, when I have a good Boros deck, I'm like, but I just want to play all these spells. Like,
exactly.
If I play these spells, I can win.
Right, and if you and because all the other decks are so fast, if you stumble on lands, you frequently lose. But what that means is you only need 22 instead of 23 or 24 playables, which means that you can afford to take more risks, at least in my mind. So I like to stay very open, and I like to take just the most powerful card out of the pack for the first 6-7 picks. Because even if I don't, even if I don't end up playing those cards, that means someone else doesn't get them. And while that's always true in draft, I feel like you need to curve out in this format a lot. You really need to have creatures on turn 2 and turn 3 and really on turn 1. And so if I'm taking, Syndic of Tithes and I'm taking other things that people can't curve out with, it just makes it more likely for the table that it stumbles.
Yeah.
And that means that if I end up having to switch colors late and my deck's a little awkward, I don't have quite the tightest curve, it's less likely for other people to be able to do that too, so it's not as bad.
Okay. It sounds like we're ready to go back at the news desk, so we're going to throw it over there. After that, we're going to come back to us, and we're going to be watching the actual matches from this Gatecrash Draft here at Pro Tour Gatecrash. So we're really excited. For now, let's send it back to the booth.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the news desk. Rich and BDM with you. Now, Brian, you had a chance to look a little bit at Ben's draft there, and you appear to be wearing some blue and green paraphernalia.
I've been known to shamble shark.
Yeah. Happy?
Very happy. Very happy. He's got some good cards. Obviously, you want more Cloudfin Raptors than he ended up with, but you can borrow from other guilds. We see he has a Death Cult Rogue in there as a flyer, and his deck looks
virtual flyer.
Virtual flyer.
Yeah, can't be blocked except by other rogues. Yeah. So there's quite a neat little trick there, isn't there? Actually, because a lot of people I know go in with their Death Cult Rogue, going the coast is clear, and
I've certainly ambushed it with a variety of a couple of the different rogues in the format that people aren't. They're so used to thinking of him as unblockable.
Sure.
And then you're like, no, I'll block.
It's like Balustrade Spy,
sure.
for example.
Yes, a perfect
flyer.
example. That's the best possible scenario.
Indeed. All right. Now, we said that we were going to be showing you 2 pods through the morning. So let's take a look at our master pod scoreboard, if you will, for the first 3 rounds here at Pro Tour Gatecrash, so you can just see what we're looking at. So let's take a look at that now if we can. There it is. On the left of your screen, you are looking at the pod that you've just seen Ben Stark draft from. Obviously, no one's won, no one's lost, everyone's every bit as much a chance of the top 8 as anyone else. Do you like Ben Stark for 3-0 in that pod?
There was a lot of weird stuff going on in that draft. It was clear to me that no one was Dimir. And it's maybe a little surprising considering that fact that people know that Dimir's underdrafted. I know that at the Star City Black House, Dimir was almost overdrafted.
Oh, interesting.
And
one of those mini meta games.
Sure. But we saw a Duskmantle Seer going 4th or 5th. I saw a Death Cult Rogue, lap the table. So very, very interesting. Also, those names are in alphabetical order. So what you don't really see there is that Chapin, Reed Duke, and Godenis Vidagiris, teammates, were sitting 1, 2, 3.
Ah, okay. And when you say 1, 2, 3, you're talking about passing to their left.
Yes.
So in essence, not running the next door neighbor's draft, but signaling hopefully
Absolutely.
pretty clearly.
With a lot of information based on knowing how the people that you're drafting with draft. So you know that if I send this card, not explicitly but implicitly, that I'm probably not this.
Okay. If we take another look at that scoreboard, you'll see that Gaudenis Vidigiris is listed under Lithuania. That's his choice. That's his chosen flag, the yellow, green, and red there, breaking up some of our USA. On the other pod, on the right of screen...
We like to call that a World Magic Cup hedge.
You're outrageous. On the right of screen, the second pod, you get the likes of Ben Seck, who once upon a time would have been Australian,
yes.
but been in the US so long now, he has the stars and stripes next to his name, as does, of course, Luis Scott Vargas, and then the virtual American, Paolo Vita Dama de Rosa.
Right.
I talked to Paolo. He came to our local store a couple of weeks back, and I asked him, I said, would you ever consider just moving full-time to the States? There are so many great tournaments there, week in, week out. And he said, well, yeah, that's true, but I love where I'm from, and I love my friends, and I love my lifestyle back in Brazil, and I think it would be a big wrench to actually full-time shift.
I'm always fascinated by the fact that he somehow manages to have a rich social life in South America. It doesn't seem possible. He's never there. But citizen of the world, Paolo Vitor Damaduros.
Indeed.
Get him a globe next to his name.
Indeed. All right, Hall of Famer, of course. Now, what are they drafting? They're drafting Gatecrash. We saw Ben Stark give us a window into Simic. We also saw some elements of Demir. But what we want to do in the next few minutes is take you through all 5 guilds and just get a flavor of what they may be doing. So as you're watching the matches, some of you I know just getting into the swing of Gatecrash draft, sense whether they're on their right path towards victory.
Look at some of the top commons, some of the top uncommons, and a basic game plan for what each guild is trying to do.
So let's start alphabetically, no preferences here, with Boros. All right, here we go. So let's take a look, and this is coming from inside R&D, and we have Plan A, go wide, fill the battlefield with creatures and attack, and again. And if there was space on the graphic, we'd say, and again. Plan B, though, supplement your aggressive curve with spells that help push through damage. Weakness, Boros creatures are smaller than average, can be stymied, good word, by early defenses. BDM, talk us through that. What do you feel about that kind of
absolutely.
rundown?
I think anybody who's been on the receiving end of a Boros beatdown knows exactly what they mean by go wide. You look at your hand, you keep it, you're like, okay, I've got a Krakenora in here, I've got, I'll be able to stabilize, and your opponent comes out with like, a Tin Street Denizen, a
Foundry Street,
Foundry Street, a Wojak Halberdier. They changed all the street names, and
just to
to get a little and then the third turn Sky Knight Legionnaire,
yes.
and you're just under siege. You're on the draw. Maybe you're going to make your turn 3 drop, and I mean you've already taken a ton of damage. The Halberdier has got first strike. You can't reasonably block it. It is scary.
Yeah, I think the key to Boros is if you want to be beating Boros, you better have your defenses ready on turn 2 and 3.
Right.
If you're thinking that you're going to go land, key rune on 3, urban evolution at 5, draw some cards, play an extra land, you're not. Yeah. You're really not.
They keep talking about urban evolution, but it's really just a boondoggle.
Fair. All right, so let's take some Magic Online data from the first few days. Let's take a look.
Awesome.
Top commons for Boros. Let's take a look. So up at the top, it is the Sky Knight Legionnaire with a without an E, the Wojak Halberdiers, the 3/2 for 2, and another 2-mana spell, purely white this time, Daring Skyjet. No real surprises there.
No real surprises. I a little surprised that maybe Mugging is not there as a top common.
Right.
It's a great card. It's a perfect card for that deck. Either clearing the way of a small creature, or you're actually just punching through a blocker. Like, oh, here's my 4/4, and you're like, okay, I'll mug it and I'll get through. You can't block, and
yeah, people forget that second clause on mugging, because so often, because the format's fast, you're kind of left with going, okay, I've got 2 damage, you've got 2 toughness there on your Syndic of Tides, I'll kill it.
So there's something important, I think, on that slide, which is that It was the number one. It's the number one drafted archetype on Magic Online right now.
Okay.
And I think anyone who's tried to draft that deck can sense that, right? Because there's a lot of times where you're like, okay, I've got a pick. I don't have a pick.
Yes.
And the cards can dry up. And I think that's why, even though it's the number one drafted archetype, it's the third most winning archetype.
Because you can crash and burn.
Because you can crash and burn. You can think you have a reasonable Boros deck and just lose to the nuts Boros deck. I've had it happen.
Best matchup is Dimir. Worst matchup is Gruul. Well, I guess the thing with Gruul is it gets bigger quickly.
I like being Gruul against Boros.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, Gruul is all about 2-drops. So.
All right. What about the uncommons? Let's take a look at those. There you see them. Truefire Paladin is in at number 2. We chose that, just a fantastic piece of art on the left of your screen. Sunhome Guildmage, that does all sorts of trickery and chicanery. And then Boros Charm. Now, Boros Charm, Brian, is a card that we're going to see potentially later in the day in Standard.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it does a lot of stuff. It protects your team, makes them indestructible. It does 4 damage to your opponent's head. It's like, if you're playing a deck that's Boros-y, that is, follows the ethos of Boros, and you're beating down and you're getting in, it's like, oh, 4. I've had Kibler-like games where I'm like 4, 4, 4. In playtesting Standard.
Them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Just one thing about True, I think that the Sunhome Guildmage might be deposed by the Truefire Paladin.
Over time.
Over time. He feels like the better Guildmage to me.
He's pretty savage. One thing, though, if you happen to have the Sunhome Guildmage and Court Street Denizen, where you can end of turn make your soldier, and that triggers the tapping your guy.
I love Court Street Denizen.
Sure.
I think that's a card to me. If we did those slides in a month, I think Court Street Denizen would be a guy who's starts climbing up there.
And is that because you think tempo is very important in the format?
Yeah. I think he, just that ability to, play a Sky Knight Legionnaire on turn 4, tap their guy, get in,
Neat.
Yeah. Have you ever night watched with Court Street Denizen on the table? It's exciting. It's exciting.
It is quite exciting. All right. So that's Boros. What's up next? Well, it's the unloved sort of Dimir. Let's take a look. What's the plan A, BDM?
Evasive creatures and Dimir Keyrune along with Cypher can provide advantages turn after turn. Cypher is really the key there. You really want to be milling your opponent. By that I mean putting cards from their library into their graveyard.
Yeah.
Comes from Millstone.
Yeah,
one of the original cards.
That's plan B. Mill your opponent all the way.
Well, I think plan A and plan B are sort of
plan A/B.
Yeah, plan A. Yeah. I mean, White of District 6 is sort of the beatdown version of Plan A, where you're using
the one that's really a 6/6 because you've put stuff in the graveyard. Now the weakness is very true. It can fall to early aggression before the defenses can get set up, or the Cypher-based engines where you're actually going, I've got an unblockable guy, it's going to tap your man, you can't deal with this turn after turn, can get rolling.
And the problem for me with Dimir is that so many of the cards that are good in Dimir are also very good in Orzhov, also very, very good in Simic, right? Like, I want the Hands of Binding, I'll splash for Shadow Slice, so it's sometimes you're getting picked apart. Death Cult Rogue, goes in both of those other guilds.
Absolutely.
And so it can be a little frustrating, once you realize that you want to be Dimir, suddenly you find that the cupboard's being picked apart.
Sure. Let's look at the top commons. Let's take a look at those. And what do we have? The top 3 coming up. There you see our drafting Dimir. Let's move to the next slide, and we will give you the top 3 commons. They are Grizzly Spectacle, removal, Cloudfin Raptor, that's a 0/1, and Death Cult Rogue, the 2/2 for 3.
That's kind of interesting that Cloudfin Raptor's there, because talking to players here, Cloudfin Raptor is not really a card that they prioritize at all.
Do you know why?
In Dimir. It's very hard to evolve. Okay. It's very hard to evolve. You tend to be playing more control-ish. You don't have that sort of same flood of creatures. You're not going wide like you do in Simic as well as Boros, where you're just playing guys every turn, playing 2 guys a turn. You know, you're playing a guy, you want to play a guy, get in, do something, Grizzly Spectacle them, you know, play a Cypher card, and then, you know, Death's Approach, and you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
It doesn't allow you, like, that's why Death Cult Rogue's so nice. It's one guy, you can go to work with it. I'm a little surprised by Cloudfin Raptor. I don't think that that's an ideal card for that guild.
Well, maybe that contributes to it being the number 4 guild played and the number 5 in win percentage. Dimir is down in the dirt at the moment.
Sure.
Let's see if some of the top uncommons could change the path for Dimir.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at those. Here they come. And our top 3 uncommons are Removal, Killing Glare, sometimes Removal, Dimir Charm, and the previously mentioned White of Precinct 6, which I must admit, until I actually saw it in action, I didn't really get. I was like, it's like one of these sort of quasi shades almost, like it's a 1/1 that gets a bit bigger.
You need to commit a little bit for that guy. And, but again, if you have also the deck with all the removal, which you can sometimes end up in, where people are prioritizing like getting into their guilds, and you could be just sort of sitting there and Grizzly Spectacle, and I got a Killing Glare, and I've got this, you know, Charm, either Dimir or Orzhov, you know what I mean? And you're like, you know, assembling all that. Well, suddenly, you know, you also get your white, and you're like, kill that, play my white, and it's a 5/5, and you can't get through it.
Fair.
So
that's Boros, that's Dimir. Now, I would imagine that Gruul is pretty popular. People like to bash in, and you can really bash in with Gruul. Let's take a look at what their plans are. So plan A, that was like a Gruul translation of plan A. Plan B,
I was going to say more like,
and then, so that was plan B. And then weakness, it's kind of how that works.
Yeah, so what they're talking about there is, well, I love Disciple of the Old Ways. I like Greenside Watcher.
Yep.
I want to have a lot of 2-drops in my Gruul deck, and then, you know, be able to, you know, use my tricks. You know, my tricks being, you know, Shanktail, and you know, the Swine, and I love a Slaughterhorn. Oh, do I love a Slaughterhorn?
I think you won't be alone in that.
Yeah, and you know, just smashing in. You know, where that gets tricky is, you know, if someone's blocking, you know, if someone's willing to put their blocker in front of your creature, you have untapped mana, they're like, okay, well, I know he's going to do this. You know, Smite becomes an awesome 2-for-1 against Gruul.
Destroy target blocked creature.
Destroy target blocked creature. And so, you know, I block with a guy. You need to do something. Either you're going to take the trade, or maybe just the bounce. You know, where I'm playing like a 1/4.
Yep.
You know, or are you going to invest a spell? You know, a creature card that you're going to Blood Rush, and then I'm going to smite it.
Yeah, interestingly, people often equate Blood Rush with the old giant growth type effects or common bond, but one big difference is that you didn't always know that an opponent would have giant growth or common bond type effects. But anyone who goes mountain, forest, here's a 2-drop, here's a Greenside Watcher, you know that they have them and they have multiples of them. Right. So you do play differently with Gruul rather than other pump spells down the years.
And honestly, sometimes just getting those cards out of their hand, you know, making them, you know, use, you know, a Zertar Swine on turn 3 means they don't have it on turn 5 to play, where it's pretty formidable.
Yeah, you discarded your 5/4 monster.
And also taking a turn off of developing your board. So,
the number 5 guild archetype played, but the number 2...
Really?
Yeah.
What are you people doing?
Watching us, hopefully.
Yes.
The number 2 winning
go draft
percentage.
Gruul.
Look, here's the top commons: Madcap Skills, Mugging, and the Slaughterhorn that we've seen shown there, which that's a pretty interesting one. Madcap Skills is a card that long-time players ought to be terrified of. It's a creature enchantment that doesn't boost toughness, that leaves your guy super vulnerable to a 2-for-1, but it's really good.
Yeah, and you get to pick your spots with it. And again, you know, with Gruul, you get to force them to put 2 guys in. You know, it says that my creature has to be blocked by at least 2 creatures, the enchanted creature. So if they put 2 creatures in, and now you have your Zertar Swine, that's, you know, that's kind of the definition of a blowout.
All right, let's take a look at the top uncommons for Gruul, if we can. You've seen the commons there, but uncommons, here they come. Any moment. Now, there it is.
You didn't say it in Gruul, that's the problem.
Gorklan Rampager, Scarred Guildmage, and we've highlighted there a little bit of solid, super solid removal, Ground Assault. I do find it a little odd that Ground Assault utterly annihilates every flyer in the game. It's like, they're really angry.
Yeah, well, they're throwing a rock up at them.
Is that how? Okay.
Yeah, they're hurling a rock, right? That's how I read it.
That seems perfectly
I'm
fair.
pretty happy with opening on any of those cards.
Absolutely.
In a Gruul draft.
Yeah. So that's Gruul. We have 3 down, 2 to go. The players building their last few minutes of pulling in those final cards.
Yeah, you'll see people playing Magic very soon.
Yeah, you really will. But next up for us is Orzhov. So let's take a look at the Black-White Guild of Death and Taxes. Here we go. So you can, one version of it is you have aggressive creatures, you bring opponent's life totals low, and then Extort finishes the game off. Plan B, you can go the other way, you can play defensively, kind of stay out of the red zone, build up Extort, stay alive, and then you get some late game bombs. The weakness is that, yes, Extort is good at extending the game on defense, has a hard time actually turning the tide by itself, because if you're being hit by a 4/4 flyer, the one Extort trigger isn't really going to save you.
Sure. This is probably the guild I've had the most success with on Magic Online playing. That and Simic are my 2 most successful. I'd probably Gruul. I gotta tell you, it's, you get out there with a Basilica Screecher, you play a couple of Syndicate Tides, you can actually get a little aggressive with that deck too. You can sort of play it both ways depending on which cards come to you. I gotta tell you that it is pretty brutal in the mid game when every spell you play is a Lightning Helix. It's like, oh, I'm gonna play this 1/2 flyer, and by the way, it's a Lightning Helix. And by the way, next turn, so you have 3 Extort triggers, you pay, they take 3, you gain 3.
Yeah, that is pretty savage. And when you talk about it like that, that's why Extort's so powerful. Right. When we talk about drain life for 2, from 15 years ago, and you're getting to do this every time you cast the spell.
Right. And then again, we talked about people borrowing cards from Dimir, right? Yep. Cypher is unbelievable in Orzhov. I've had a lot of Orzhov decks where I play a Balustrade Spy, and I actually put my own cards into my graveyard, and then a turn later, you have like a Midnight Recovery on your Spy, and you're regrowing creatures from your graveyard, and then you have this like steady supply of Extort triggers. You can be pretty aggressive with it. I really like the combination of Orzhov with Cypher from Dimir.
All right, let's take a look at the top 3 commons then for Orzhov. Grizzly Spectacle again tops the list, just as it did for Dimir, which is interesting because it is double black in its cost. It does demand it's properly black.
Well worth it.
Sure. Basilica Screecher, the 1/2 flyer, and there you see one of my favorite cards in the set, just apparently an innocuous 2/2 Grizzly Bear, Syndic of Tides, but with Extort, it's just a great card. How did it do? The second guild archetype played, the #1 winning percentage. Interestingly, the worst matchup is Dimir. Why would that be?
Well, because Orzhov tends to grind the game out a little longer. You're more susceptible to getting your cards milled out from under you, right? You're more susceptible to, just losing the game to a non-damage based strategy. You're grinding. You're like, I gain 1, you lose 1. I gain 2, you lose 2. And then, the Dimir deck is like, okay, well, I have this guy you can't block, and, mill 3, okay, now mill another 3 when I hit you, and counter that with this Psychic Strike.
And Orzhov isn't necessarily great at finding specific removal. So if you get a couple of Sage's Row Denizens down, for example,
sure,
2/3 that mills 2 every time, that's 4 cards plus the card they draw. That's 5 cards a turn essentially going by. And an Extort doesn't have a kind of 5th gear. It kills you by driving along, in the middle lane.
It can be a little plotting in the late game. You're like, unless you have something like a Midnight Recovery engine.
Sure.
But you're like, draw a card. Oh, it's a spell. Play it. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the top uncommon, shall we? And here we have 1,000 Lashes up at the top, one of my favourite cards again in the set. Gift of Ortsova gets you lifelink, other bonus, and Orzhov Charm as well.
Have you put a Gift of Orzova on an Alms Beast yet? I highly recommend you do this.
Is that something that's kind of quite fun?
It's quite fun, yes.
All right.
I can tell you that you close those games out quickly.
Okay, talking of quickly, we have one more guild to get to because I can hear players shifting around the room.
Ooh.
That means round one's
Table
not far
scratching
away.
the floor.
Let's get to Simic, see what their plan is. This is Ben Stark's draft plan, maybe. Plan A, evolve creatures early and often, turning early creatures into game-ending threats. Or B, defend the ground with extra tough creatures like Blockadile, as I call Croconera, while attacking with evasive creatures like Drakewing Krasis. The weakness, though, evolve does take time, and Simic creatures may not be able to stand up to an early onslaught. You are the king of Simic, certainly in the drafts I've been doing, so tell us why you love it so much.
I mean, I love a Cloudfin Raptor. I love Experiment 1. I like being able to play stuff early, have them be, very formidable late game, mid game, and late game threats. And again, I'm sorry, Demir, I'm borrowing your tools. I'm going to take Hands of Binding from you, which we saw Ben Stark do in that draft, and I'm going to block you. Yeah, yes, you're right. I'm a little slow to get up to speed, but once I get up to speed, my guys are going to be bigger than yours, and I'm going to have all these tools to sort of either bounce your guys or tap your guys down.
Okay, let's take a look at the top commons for Simic, coming out of the Magic Online data, remember? So here they come. Cloudfin Raptor, right up at the top there. People love themselves a 0-power guy, it turns out.
Yeah.
What are they doing? Drakewing Krasis, 3/1 Flying Trample, and Shamble Shark. You know how sometimes, BDM, in Magic, there are little interactions that just feel utterly miserable to you?
Yeah.
So here's one, if you're a Boros player, like I sometimes am. You're on the play, you go land, maybe you make a 1-drop or not. Turn 2, you make Wojciech Halberdiers, 3/2. You're thinking in your head they're going to battalion his first strike somewhere down the line. Your opponent plays his forest to go with his island, passes the turn, and you're like, yeah, no turn 2 play. In with my Wojciech Halberdiers, you're at 17. Oh wait, you flashed out a Shamble Shark. My Wojciech Halberdiers is dead. I have one creature in play. Battalion's miles away. Ugh. Miserable.
Yeah.
Miserable. I don't like Shamble Shark at all when I'm playing Boros.
Yeah, I'm a huge Shamble Shark fan. I had to go in the other night in the draft. It was phenomenal for me. I had 3 or 4 of them, and it just does everything you want to do. And also, you can flesh it out as a trick and make your guys bigger as well. Your Croconora suddenly gains a point of power and toughness. Your Cloudfin Raptor gets a little bigger. It's very sweet.
It's a number 3 guild archetype, played number 4 in winning percentage. Good matchup against Dimir. Well, kind of everything has a good matchup against Dimir currently. Interestingly, the worst matchup is Boros because, again, it's all about, do you have time? In a sense, one way I think about Evolve...
It's a turn slower in some ways than Boros.
It's almost like the Evolve creatures come into play with a 1-turn pacifism.
Yeah.
Because they can't attack realistically because they're not big enough to get through. And they can't afford to block because you have to wait for them to get the counter to then be ready to get through.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you literally, even though you're playing on turn 1 and 2 and 3, it's like you're casting them on 2, 3, 4. And that's something to watch out when we see Ben Stark in action. So we've had a look at the top commons. What about the uncommons? Let's take a look at those. And we begin with Zamek Guildmage. Of course, all the guilds have guild mages in and around there. Crown Ceratok, the 4/3 Trampler.
That card's fantastic.
Yeah, and the reason it's fantastic, I mean, it's great anyway. It's a 4/3 Trampler for 4, but it's the next bit that really pushes it.
Creatures with counters on them gain trample.
Yeah. So hopefully that's all of them.
Yeah.
That's the idea. That Experiment 1, by the way, that we've highlighted, that's something that we talked about in our preview show last night. If you haven't watched that yet, do go check it out, though not during the rounds, obviously. But we talked about Experiment 1 there as a card very much for Constructed.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know whether or not we'll see it, but certainly if there's a green-white humans deck, that guy just drops right into there. Oh my gosh, I don't know. Wow, we're announcing the feature matches, and I'm getting distracted by the prospect of Ben Sack and Luis Scott Vargas fighting.
Okay, let me tell you about the 4 feature matches we have. First of all, we have Reed Duke against Ben Stark. That is your round 1. we will be on video starting with that. We also have Mr. John Finkel up against Matt Nass, Grand Prix winner. We have Ben Seck against Louis Scott Vargas. And we have the small matter of Vincent Lemoire of Belgium against Shota Yasuoka of Japan.
Wow. So anyone who thought they were going to get to these draft pods and they're like, well, I'm going to see 7 people I don't know, and this will be gravy, is sorely disappointed.
It will not.
But it's good for you at home because you're going to see some great Magic this round.
You really
some of the
are.
best in the game.
Okay. So you think Ben drafted well. You like his position with Simic. What are your expectations for the morning as a whole? What are we going to learn from the next 3.5 hours here at PT?
I think we're going to get a sense of where Demir actually sets in this format. I think again, like I said, people talking to various teams, people were very, very down on Demir. But then there would always be someone who'd pull me aside and they're like, Demir's actually quite good. And so I'm really curious to see where Demir settles in the, around the table. Like I said, at this table that we just watched, it didn't seem like it was being drafted at all. Cypher cards were going around the table. Duskmantle Seer is a card that, went 4th or 5th. Death Cult Rogue, going all the way around the table. So kind of surprising.
Well, you will certainly be able to see that in action because, of course, we have the draft viewer coming your way from Ben Stark's table. So you won't just be able to replay his picks, you will see where all those cards went.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how the Chapin, Reed Duke, Godenis Vitogaris Flying Wedge played out.
Indeed. All right, it is time for round 1 of Pro Tour Gatecrash. Let's take you down to the booth and Marshall Sutcliffe.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the booth. Marshall Sutcliffe, Zach Hill, and one of the things that I really was looking forward to when we were coming into the draft portion here is that not only do we get to see Ben, he's one of my favorite players on the Pro Tour, as an avid drafter myself, I look up to him, and we get to see him play the deck that he just drafted. So we watched him pick every single pick from all 3 packs. We don't know how he's built it. We're going to get to see that unfold in front of us. We have a pretty good idea. And he is going to be playing against Reed Duke, who was sitting 2 seats to his left. And we're told he's in Demir. I don't know any details about his deck. I do know that Nate Holt from Walking the Plains was out helping out, and he said he's really excited to see Reed Duke's deck. It might be Mill. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But anyway, we get a chance to see now Ben Stark play the deck that he just drafted.
Well, and I do remember Team Star City, it's kind of not that often that you see Demir Mill be a thing. A lot of the times it's a more tempo-oriented deck with a lot of evasion creatures. But Andrew Cuneo drafted a deck with, he drafted a bona fide Mill deck with a 5, Sage's Row Urbanite, the 2/3 for 3.
That is not what it's called.
It's some urbanite. I don't know. I'm making up words, but it's a 2/3 for 3. Whenever you play a blue creature, you mill him for 2 cards. Turns out when you get 2 in those in play, you can mill your opponent out really quick. And of course, he had a Mind Grind to close it all out. So.
Oh yeah, and Mind Grind is kind of one of the key opens, or at least it's a great help if you're thinking about going for the mill deck.
For sure. So it doesn't happen that often, but I've definitely seen it happen with high-caliber players, and I think he ended up going undefeated in that draft.
Yeah, it's Sage's Row Denizen. I looked
Sage's
it up.
Row
I
Denizen.
But yeah, I actually have had a chance on Magic Online to draft the mill deck one time as well. I did manage to win the draft.
Oh, yeah?
Although I have to say the strategy didn't feel I really managed to win as accurate.
Yeah,
it was the last turn, and it was one of those things where it gets a little dicey at times because you're playing. Like I was playing Paranoid Delusions, which is a card that I would never touch normally, but I'm like, we're doing it. I just want to try
4,
this.
Draw 1.25 cards.
Mill 3. It's the Cypher
card.
Oh,
the Cypher card.
Yeah, mill them for 3, hit them, mill them for a little more. Yeah, and then like Balustrade Spy, and then I had my grind
Spy
as well.
is awesome.
Yeah, but whatever way Reed decides to go, we know he's comfortable playing decks like this. So
for sure.
we're going to get him playing, though, against what's going to be a really sweet Evolve deck, I think, in the Simic Guild for Ben Stark. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, and we've been talking about throughout the course of the weekend, we've done some drafts and stuff, is and I've started to come to this conclusion. You've got a little bit of a more advanced eye for it, which is the Dimir deck, which is what I think Reed is going to be playing here. The game plans actually pick up some of the extort cards from Orzhov, the cheap ones preferably, get some Cypher going, and start paying for those free Cypher activations.
The interaction is you get to, when you Cypher a card, you still cast it. So even though you're not paying any mana to do that, you can extort off of it by paying a single black usually because you're in Dimir. That interaction tends to be really powerful, and it turns out that a lot of the cards that are best in the Dimir deck don't necessarily have the Dimir mechanic, which is kind of counterintuitive. But that's how, Dimir's sneaky, right? And so they're going to steal things from other people. They're known for that, and it looks like in draft that actually plays out as well. Exactly.
One of the cards that we were looking at that was one on the list that BDM and Rich just went over was Cloudfin Raptor as being one of the key cards. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Right, so Cloudfin Raptor, obviously really, really good in the Simic deck, but I think it's important in Dimir too because you always want a card that you can Cypher off of. And Dimir doesn't have a lot of things to do on the first turn of the game. It actually could afford some more things to do on the second turn of the game. So being able to use those turns early and deploy something to the battlefield, even if the Cloudfin Raptor is only a 1-2 for a while, you're going to be able to make it a 2-3, and a 1-mana 2-3 flyer is unbelievable, especially when you just need to have a card to Cypher onto all of the time. So that's another example of a card that sort of looks like a Simic card, but is very much at home in the Dimir deck.
Yeah, so a couple of the other cards that we're talking about, Basilica Screecher, that seems like a key one for the strategy that we're putting forth here.
Very important.
Metropolis Sprite, underrated I think a little bit
I think so. It's one of the best blue commons, but it looks like kind of a bad Welkin turn. But again, you just need the evasion, and you need the clock, you need the early play.
That's right. All right. So, and then another one that I was thinking of is Death Cult Rogue.
Yeah.
That's one that is more obviously
kind of straightforward,
Dimir.
right?
Yeah, but it carries the same type of thing where it's one that can keep attacking no matter what.
Exactly.
Grinding them down and then get Cypher activations. Now, I know you're a big fan of Hands of Binding.
Yeah.
Would you consider that the premier Cypher card for
I think
this
so.
deck?
I mean, it's very aggressively costed, and it keeps you alive while clearing the way for your blockers to cast more Cypher cards.
Now, when it comes to the extort stuff, you mentioned that sometimes we're going to want to steal the cards from Orzhov to put in there. Basilica Screecher is one that we mentioned.
Of course, yeah, it is premier.
Are there other ones that you're looking for in particular?
Oh, yeah. I mean, basically anything you can cast. I actually like the Uncommon Thrall a lot, again, because it's a 1-drop. So.
All right. So I think we are just about ready to go down to the feature match area. Why don't we go down there right now for round 1 here from Pro Tour Gatecrash.